Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Powerless Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Liam Horrigan, who is a returning guest, the guitarist and vocalist of the band Cruel Hope out of the Toronto area in Canada. This is the second time Liam's been on, so if you want to hear his backstory on how he gets into music and all that good stuff, as well as some of the earlier songs released from Cruel Hope over the past couple of years, definitely go check out that episode. It's one of my favorite ones I've done, as well as we did a lot of breakdowns of socio-political commentary and the state of the world and various different facets and all those things. Liam's a person I really enjoy talking to because he talks a lot about politics and, socioeconomic conditions, socialism, environmentalism, all those things that if you've watched the show, you know that I care deeply about and like to talk about with people quite a bit. And we break that down even more extensively in this episode because we break down the album, again, The End of the Beginning of the End, that just came out on April 4th, which would have been this past Friday from when this is being recorded. And it's an absolutely fantastic record, not overly long, about 40 minutes long. So pretty easy to listen through on a commute and things of that nature when you're listening to music. And it is absolutely incredible if you like bands like Rise Against, if you like Billy Talent, if you like that kind of mix of hard rock, indie rock, and punk rock in that sort of vein with politically charged lyrics and socioeconomic conditions talked about and all these different facets. This is definitely for you. Liam breaks down each one of the songs on this record lyrically, as well as kind of talks about the background of how he writes music, primarily or almost exclusively for this record, all on his own and self-produced it and had someone else mix it. So we break down all of that kind of stuff and more, get into a little bit of the Canadian election that's coming up in just a couple of weeks here, and kind of the bleakness of electoral politics and how people need to look beyond it for some of the existential crises that we're facing pretty dramatically right now across the board around the world and everything in between. So it was great to talk to Liam and catch up with him again. Again, cannot recommend checking out this album enough. It's going to be one of my favorite of the year. It'll be a tough contender to beat out from a top 10 for me at the end of the year already. I can tell that much. Definitely check it out and definitely check out the podcast, but more importantly, check out the album, The End of the Beginning of the End by Cruel Hope. If you want to follow Cruel Hope on social media, it is cruel_hope. All of that stuff will be in the notes below. They also have an official website that you can look at to find the different avenues to get their merch or see what's going on with the band in general and things of that nature. And that'll all be below as well. If you want to get in contact with me or follow the podcast on social media, it is at thepowerlesspod. I am having a little bit of copyright issues because I share music on this podcast through Spotify. So I'm dealing with them a little bit there. As of now, things are good. I'm kind of working things through a little bit on the legal end with them. So for now, make sure to follow on YouTube, regardless of what's going on there, because nothing there is getting taken down or anything like that or having copyright issues. So follow on YouTube. Of course, follow on Spotify, follow on social media. We're on all of them at The Powerless Pod. Email me at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com if you want to be on the show, if you want to tell me what you think about the show, if you like it, if you don't like it, if you think Liam and I are nuts and total dirtbag communists or something like that from what we talked about in this episode, reach out to me. I like to hear it all. And that will all be below as well. Remember that we got merch with the logo on the back and other designs as well at our merch store. There's a Patreon if you want to pay $2.50 a month to support there. That's really appreciated. That helps me with the editing software and the promotions and just trying to keep the show afloat as best I can as a mostly one-stop shop here or one-man show or whatever I'm trying to say there. So definitely consider supporting there. But above all, I just hope you enjoy the episodes. And we've got a great catalog of episodes similar to this, as well as solely political episodes and solely music episodes in the back catalogs. If this is your first time listening, definitely go back through, listen to Liam's first episode, listen to the recent one I put out with Carolyn Kerouac, who's doing a unionization effort at Brown University. I talked to Joshua P. Hill recently about the inauguration and the current Trump administration. My good friend Alec and I broke down the albums of 2024. Talked to a band Luca out of Chicago that's absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of really good episodes coming up very soon too that are already recorded or in the process of getting recorded in the next week. So definitely follow and hit the subscribe button and all that good stuff so you can get notified when those come out. And that'll be my spiel for the day. Here's the episode with Liam Horrigan returning to talk about the album The End of the Beginning of the End from Cruel Hope on the Powerless Podcast. Thanks so much. All right, I'm here for the next episode of the Powerless Podcast with a returning guest, Liam Horrigan, who is the vocalist, guitar player, mastermind. I think it's fair to say behind Cruel Hope, out of the Toronto area. We're here to chat about, and happy to have you on. I'm glad we get to do this right before the release of the album. Congrats on the initial full length record coming out on April 5th, titled "The End of the Beginning of the End." Obviously, there's been several singles from this. You've been kind of soft rolling this out for quite a while, but how's everything been going? How do you feel about the release coming up in just a couple of days, and everything in between?
Yeah, man. First, thanks for having me back. It's really it's fun every time we do one of these, and love to talk about the album. It's been a hectic few months for sure, and especially like these last couple of weeks leading up to the release. But it's going to be good. We've got our release party coming up this Friday. I was just getting back from our last practice for that today, and yeah, really excited to put this out into the world. Like the singles have gotten pretty decent traction from like the people that we know care about our stuff, and so that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's been cool to see one. Every song you've released kind of seems to, and this is not a negation of any of the singles or whatever, but like each one seems to almost top itself in like what I'm intrigued by, what I'm into, which is a cool thing that each song is great on its own, and kind of feels like a big build up to a release, which is cool. Before we get started, because I had, obviously you were nice enough earlier this week to send over an early copy of the tracks for me to kind of break down. There's a lot of singles you put out. I think if I just counted them, and you'd think I'd remember, but in my defense, I'm old and it's a little later than I'm used to. But I think you've had like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the songs, right, or have been singles, which I know is a tactic a lot of bands use, and I think especially for like an up and coming band like yourself, it makes sense. But I just always ask this when people are putting out that many singles, like, were you happy to do that? Did you feel like that was like a useful marketing tactic? Because I know there's a little bit, like, for me, it's always, you kind of think back in the old days of like 2 or 3 singles out, maybe you put out the album, people have to check out a vast majority of it for the first time. What was the kind of thought process behind that? Was that just kind of getting in the age of, Nat IQ brains, or attention levels of people just getting connected to the band more up to the release? Or was kind of the thought that it released 5 of the singles from the record?
Yeah, so the plan kind of evolved as it went on. The initial plan was to actually like release pretty much everything as a single at some point, including like re-releasing some of the tracks that came out with the album, like after the album came out as singles. Again, just trying to like give each song like it's kind of time to shine. And then that kind of came down to like, okay, well, maybe we'll do 6 before the album comes out. And like, yeah, 100, like you got the motivation for it 100%. It's like trying to get the Spotify algorithm to do its thing, trying to, get the people's attention on like each song. And then like parts of it were really nice, but it's like that marketing process is such a high burn thing, because like you got to make some kind of video for each one of them. You've got to set up the marketing. You've got to like be posting about each one of them. And so the original intention was 6. We went down to 5 because I was just like, I don't have the capacity to do this.
Yeah.
And then like the other piece of it too is as we went along, like, we used to be big into running like Facebook and Instagram ads and stuff. And like those just kind of stopped working. Like we were doing everything that we used to be doing, and like it's like a switch flipped, and all of a sudden, like it's not like the music quality has really gone down. It was like stuff off the same album. Like some of the first releases did well, and then all of a sudden it's like we're doing the exact same thing and it's hitting nothing. So we're like, you know what? Screw that. No more ads. Like we're just gonna put these out with our stuff. And like that's been kind of gratifying to see that, like, obviously they don't do as well as the stuff that we've put like a few $100 behind, but like they still get out there. Like they'll still get to about 1,000 streams within a month or so. And so like it's been nice to see that even if we don't try to push this on people and like like pay for people's attention on social media, like people are kind of listening now. So that's been really nice. Like that's been a fun part of this rollout.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I'm glad you said that, because that makes me feel a little better on my end too. Because I would do those here and there for this. I kind of found like I'm in a weird space of like politics and music, and anything that was deemed political as far as a podcast clip goes, you couldn't promote.
Yeah.
But like I found the same thing, or like anything I would kind of get in from the podcast funds I would use for these little ads, because that's what anybody that tells you that's good at marketing and these kinds of things tells you to do. And it did do well early on when I started doing this. And after a while, I was like, this is like, I'm spending like, I'm not a lot of, I'm spending a little bit amount of money for like absolutely nothing. Like, it's literally Meta taking your money. And it's like, what the fuck am I doing? So then you just find different ways, or just hope things go naturally where people share it. Or like in my case, I've just tried to use different platforms more often or whatever. But it is funny how like around the same time, I'm hearing that from a lot of people that is like, they'll still take your money. They're just not going to do anything beneficial for you, in reciprocation. It's truly wild that they can just get away with that shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it does help on your end, especially that the songs are good. The songs are catchy. Got a lot of, you've got, what I like about your band, and what I think that's why I first got drawn to it when we did your first initial podcast, where I think we actually did mention that you were initially going to like roll out one song at a time for this record release. I wish I could find more bands like yours in a way where there's that kind of mix of hard rock and punk, that kind of rise against Billy Talent type vibe. I mean, there's probably more niche bands, if I knew what the fuck I was talking about, that I could name off as well. But this album does that, I think, the best that you've ever done of that sort of sound. I did find it funny the other day, we were talking on social media and someone was trying to give you shit and they were like, you can't even tell it's a punk band. It sounds like metal. And it's like, that's kind of the point a little bit, right? Like, it's somebody that listens to punk rock and hard rock and heavy music that's writing punk rock. Like, that's a pretty normal thing. I just thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, great job on this first and foremost. Compared to your previous songs that you had released that we chatted quite a bit about before on our last podcast together, which you going back to 2022 with Wage Slave, Someone to Hate, I'm Not Sick, and Fire, which were ones we broke down pretty intently on that last episode that people should definitely go check out if you want to hear Liam's backstory on music and all that good stuff. Was there a lot of difference between those songs and this initial album as far as songwriting, recording, and all that stuff goes? Was it just having a bigger batch of songs means you get to be more dynamic and take a little more risk with things instead of a kind of single oriented thing? What was kind of the differences here, if there are any, or it's just a natural progression of the end of the beginning of the end and your previous releases?
Yeah, so there's a couple differences for sure. This album was entirely like self-engineered, like kind of self-produced. Like these days, I mean, producing and like mixing, kind of there's a big overlap. So like I had the producer that I've worked with in the past do the mixes, super talented guy, Kyle Marchant. Like he's worked with Silverstein, 100% heard stuff he's worked on other than my stuff. But that kind of let me do things a little bit differently, because in the past, like I'd typically go into a studio and it would be like, okay, we've got like 3 songs to record. We're going to do it in like 3 or 4 days. And as a result, like, not to say that like corners got cut, but like you take fewer takes, like you spend less time deciding whether or not something's going to work. Whereas this was like, self-engineered in my basement over the course of like 6 months. And part of that's because I'm not that skilled of an engineer. So like where, Kyle could take like a pretty close guitar take and turn it into what it needs to be, I'm just sitting there like playing it over and over and over again until it's right. But part of it as well is things like vocals I could really take my time with and like layer like a crazy number of backup vocals and then sit there and like tune them the way that like I feel is most natural. Like, I think even just for the backup vocals, I'd spend like 4 hours a song just like melodyning everything to make sure it was like the way I wanted it, which like if I were to pay a professional to do that, there's no way they would, right? Like, there's no way they would for what I can afford to pay. So
Right.
That was the big difference. Like it was a lot more like my vision like first in this, as opposed to like any of the economics or practicalities of putting together an album. And that had like its pluses and minuses. Like there's engineering mistakes you can hear if you're listening for them, but don't listen for them. But yeah, like at the same time, it's like everything is pretty much the way I wanted to express it artistically without really any other influences. And so I'm really excited about that. It's really like body of work that's just my own in this case.
Right. So I was going to ask that later on, but I know pretty much before it was, at least if I remember right, it was all you on those songs and doing working with the producer that you referenced earlier. And that I know you have your live band and your bandmates, but this is still like a, as far as the recording goes, like a one man show, so to speak, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I tracked all of the tunes. Yeah, I wouldn't subject my voice to that process. Like, it's just, especially with me engineering, it would just, there wouldn't be a band at the end of that. It would be too unpleasant. Cause like I'll sit there for, however many hours until I get it right. And it's just, you can't do that to people. I think it's like indentured servitude or something along those lines.
Yeah, you'd be a bad socialist if you were taking all that, exploitation there, that free labor. No, but I mean, I felt that way too. Like, I'm still so amateur, and if my bandmate over in Scotland hears this, he'll be like, "You have no idea what you do. Still, I have to do so much work with all your shit." But like, I was getting like, where you could get the takes, and you can kind of make sure to do some doubles and find a way to line things up a little bit here and there and all that. And then I had a friend that was like, "Oh, so you can help me with that if I want to get started." And I was like, no, that's not what I'm saying. That's the opposite of what I'm saying. Like, if you want to wait 2 weeks for me to get this shit figured out, sure. But like, it's a different thing when you can sit there and nitpick yourself and like sort of not be stressed out, right? It's sort of like a different, it's like, I don't know, it's like learning to paint without anyone ever showing you how to do a correct stroke. Like, you can figure it out, but it's a labor for sure, right? Like, the time and effort, you're not paying the money, but you're paying with your time for sure, right? Well, why don't we go ahead and get right into the album, because I want to make sure to give time to each one of these songs. There's a lot to break down with them. First and foremost, the intro, which, sometimes I don't break down the intro for an album with people because it's some sounds or like a guitar feed or something like that feedback. You got a lot of quotes going on. Obviously, we talked in the past. You're big. You said your foremost foray in like politics and socioeconomic, commentary and activism was first and foremost about the environment, environmentalism, climate change, things of that nature. I remember that, and this was like at the forefront when I heard this. It reminded me of that, because there's definite quotes about climate change and like a lot of overlapping things going on as the music builds. So, what were some of the quotes you threw in there? Was there thought into you kind of throwing this together? Was it just kind of what sounded good? What was kind of the background for the intro for the album?
Yeah, great question. There was a lot of thought that went into kind of like curating what I wanted in there. So of course, yeah, like climate change first and foremost. And I feel like that's a really, like, that first quote that's just like, the effects of climate change are now inevitable was just the exact context that I wanted to start this kind of thing with, because that's really like when we look at everything that's going on in like the socio-political climate right now, like that climate change is driving so much of it. And that's kind of what I wanted to implicate in this intro, right? Is because that starts it, but then there's all sorts of knock-ons. Like, it goes into the forest fires, which is obviously just like a direct impact, but it also goes into some geopolitical tensions. Like, there's a newscast about like tensions in the like, I think like the Indo-Pacific, stuff like that. And the idea is it kind of builds to this like explosion sound at the end. And the idea is like, all of these things are going to end in, all at once, some kind of catastrophe. And that's, yeah, just kind of the context of all of the following songs is like, where it's the end of the beginning of the end. We're here now. And then the songs kind of get into, well, how did we get here? Right. It's like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of that, like, I think of, the movie The Emperor's New Groove, where it
Yes.
starts like in the middle and it's like, you might be wondering how I got here. It's kind of supposed to be that idea of like,
Yeah.
there's the bomb drop and then it kind of pauses and then there's a bunch of songs. It's like, yeah, this is how this happened. This is why we're here now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what I was thinking of. And it again goes back to a conversation you and I had about your song Fire you had put out, where I remember we were talking a lot about some different political things and anti-war stuff and all that. And you were like, well, before I'm like a socialist or anything like that, I'm first and foremost an environmentalist. But then you can get into the discussion of like, well, that informs everything else, right?
Mhm.
Like there is unrest in certain areas, or scarcity of resources that then create warfare or create instability or create places where the rich can take things more rapidly from certain areas that are destabilized and all these different things. And so it is nice that you kind of wrap that up. And I mean, what is it? I think it's like a minute and a half intro that it just kind of, yeah, sets the stage for what is clearly going to be laid out for the rest of the album, which is cool. I appreciate the intent there. That's cool. Going into Canary was, again, I think the first single off of this record. Great song. I can of course allude to what the lyrics are, but I'll let you do that. But the one kind of like joking gripe I had with it, I was like, yeah, it's a Canadian band. You said something about it's 35 degrees,
Yeah.
and for a second I was like, 35 degrees. That's like, it's like kind of cold, and it's like, motherfucker, you're talking Fahrenheit. Everyone else in the world knows what he's talking about. Like, shut up, you know. So that was my little funny thing I thought of this morning when I was listening to it again. It was like, oh yeah, like I literally have to sit there and do the horrible like measurement change in my head and
35 is
fail
fine.
at it. Yeah, yeah,
35
yeah.
is
I got that part. Yeah, yeah. You know what I should do? Hang on, I'll clip this a little quicker, but I'm gonna look up 35 Celsius to Fahrenheit. Oh
I think
yeah,
it's
it's 95 degrees here.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's hot. I would say that's pretty hot. So go ahead and before I keep rambling on here about your songs, why don't you break down for people? You can break down anything, you know, specifically musically that you remember from this, influences, things that you appreciated, as well as obviously the lyrical content.
Yeah. So Canary, yeah, like the first song with actual lyrics on the album, and my idea with it was it's kind of like an overture, like in these kind of like musical terms, like not musical as in like songwriting, but musical as in like musical theater kind of. There's usually that song that like there's a big ensemble and all those things, and it kind of sets the tone. And you know, the title Canary is to like a reference to the use of canaries in coal mines, right? Like they'd be your early warning system before things got really bad. And like the lyrics are kind of about that. It's like, well, right now things seem okay. You know, it's 35 on the 1st of May. It's funny that you twigged that. It was originally 95 on the 1st of May. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, I live in a country that uses Celsius. The rest of the
I
world
live
is
in a
nothing.
normal country. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna change it to 35. And it's funny that the conversion actually works out that I can still use the 5 rhyme.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like it's got this idea of, you know, if you don't look closely at what's going on, if you don't think too hard about how things are going right now, like things seem pretty okay. And I mean, it's telling. I wrote that song in 2020 when I first had the idea of this album. I don't, of all of the songs, I think it's actually aged the worst because I don't think anybody thinks things are good right now. Like we're kind of already past its relevance, but it coming out in October, like just before Trump got reelected, and like, I mean, things have really gone south since then. Like, it's good
Fair
it
to
was the
say.
first single because it really, things have changed. But yeah, and it's kind of like the whole thing is fine, things might be okay right now, but like, be ready, be aware, things are going to go sideways. And then that's kind of where it goes into the next few songs.
Well, and even with that, anyone that thinks things are terrible now, which I mean, they are. I'm not saying they're not. Is like we're ready for a rude awakening for the things to come. You know, so it's still in that way accurate because I mean, there's a lot of people that are. It's crazy how dismissive some of the conversations I've had at work or people I know that are sort of like out of politics or out of like being lasered in on what's going on in the world or even half what's going on in the world, the dismissiveness and the sort of like ability, I'm speaking specifically of Americans or people that I'm around, that the ability to just live in a separate world is astonishing, right? So it's actually like still as more relevant than I think you're alluding to there. But yeah, goes into Listen Up, which this one was cool. It felt like this one had a bit of I hope I'm like using this in the right way, but a little bit more of attitude to it compared to like
Yeah.
maybe some of your other songs, like the vocal delivery and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of a cool change up while still really sounding like Cruel Hope. But go ahead and break down the thoughts behind this one, musically, you know, lyrics, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So Listen Up, and like this kind of gets into the progression of the album as it goes on, which is kind of it goes from sort of like hopeful and naive towards kind of more revolutionary conclusions, and then eventually to kind of hopelessness. And so Listen Up is like an expression of, you know, disappointment and frustration with elected officials. That's kind of its whole essence, is like these people are, you know, capitalists, business people, etc., are doing these horrible things to us and our planet, and you're sitting there and just saying like, oh well, you know, we'll live to fight another day, we'll have another chance at this. And you know, the question asked by the lyrics is like, why is that all that you're willing to do? And the sort of bridge is like a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what's to come, where it's like, well, yeah, they don't give a shit, right? Like where there's a will, there's a profit margin. Like they'll sell us out for like pennies. Um, and so yeah, it's kind of that, like it addresses electoral politics, and then I kind of leave that in the gutter where it belongs for the rest of the album.
Well, and like with that a little bit, it's interesting that again, you clearly wrote this song several months ago at the very least, right? With getting the album together. It's funny though that it's kind of in a mirroring way talking a little bit about the Canadian election going on right now.
Yeah.
In that way, right? Because you got and it's funny too, like how much the conservative craziness of the Trump administration now in the United States is actually affecting the Canadian election, to where somehow the liberals seemingly, and I'm never gonna, because people thought that about the Harris campaign too, and then we saw how that happened, but I think it's more substantial in Canada from what I can read and what I've heard from people, is that because of that and the connection between the sort of Pierre Poilievre movement and the MAGA stuff, that they didn't know how to handle the attacks on Canada. So then all of a sudden you got the liberal, but it's not like the Liberal Party is meeting the moment. It's just that they're not openly crazy sycophants for like a foreign president, right? Like when even in the context of this song, or kind of like, that framework of the lyrical topic, like I'm just curious for you, because I know you're a very thoughtful person on these topics, like what is your read on that? Does that kind of like, did that make your brain go kind of in a corkscrew when that all happened in a matter of weeks, or what was your read there?
It was really interesting to see, because yeah, like Poilievre just kind of cynically hitched his wagon to the Trump mania in the States, and then Trump kind of turned on Canada, and all of a sudden, like the Canadian nationalism, which is a lot stronger on the right than it is anywhere else, kind of flared up. And now all of these people are like, well, we hate Trump now, or at least many of them do. Like it's the first kind of big divide on the right that we've seen for a while. And it's really taken the wind out of Poilievre's sails, because now he has to get his own personality. And then what's interesting and arguably more sinister is on the other side, like, we have Mark Carney coming in as the liberal, and everyone's like, oh, he's going to save us. But like, he cut his teeth in American banks in the US. Like he is a dyed in the wool, like fiscal conservative capitalist. And he's basically just implemented the main talking points of the conservative campaign. The first thing he did, he came in, he slashed carbon tax. And it's like, well,
yeah, right.
Like, so the conservatives, I mean, it's going to suck for Poilievre, but like, they don't even have to win the election, right? They can just scare the liberals enough into them shifting even further right. And we're still fucked. Like when they announced Carney taking over, like I made a post with the clip from Listen Up, like the bridge talking about, where there's a will, there's a profit margin. Cause it's like, we're just putting another banker in charge of the country, like red versus blue. It's not actually helping anything. And people get very frustrated when I say that, because they're like, oh, there's a difference. Like there's not. There's
no. Yeah. There's not in the long-standing deterioration, right?
Yeah.
Like you can see that on our end. I promise we'll move on to the other side. So thanks for. I love talking to you about this stuff, so I appreciate it. But it's like you can see that now here with the Democrats, people will like applaud. Like there was and I'm going to sound like a cynical asshole, and people have already yelled at me about this too on the American end. So you're not alone. But like Cory Booker just did this like record-breaking speech at the Senate floor that's basically like a filibuster, but not filibustering any policy. And it's like, I'm not going to sit here and say he didn't say a few things that weren't broadly like, yeah, you're right, this is crazy. Yeah, you're right, democracy, whatever. But like, if you analyze any of that stuff for more than 5 seconds and also realize this guy's like taking money from a lot of the same things that have bolstered up the conservative movement, you're like, it's just like, it hurts my brain when people get wrapped up in that. Like I've seen that about the Carney stuff, which a lot of like, dirtbag socialists like myself that are in Canada that I know, they're like, yeah, it's Carney mentum. It's like this whole, like, they're just, and it's like, God, like people can really get wrapped up in this, like, I know you guys don't officially have a duopoly like we do, but basically like the duo just pulls people in, and they get that politics for consumption thing, and then it's like next thing you know, yeah, you're supporting this like wealthy, fiscally conservative international banking, that worked in the United States, the UK, I believe as well, and like several other places. That it's like, this is the liberal guy, this is the champion to save it's like, we are so fucked, man.
Yeah. That's That's exactly it. And it's like, I empathize with it. Like people need hope and like
Yeah.
they just like pin it to it and like they deliberately don't think too hard about it. But like, yeah, we're beyond hope. So we can look
Yeah.
at it objectively and yeah.
This is brought to you by therapy. Please go to therapy. No, but moving on from that illustriously positive conversation that I probably have with people all the time. They're like, what is wrong with you? But I appreciate it. Going to Machines, another single. I think Canary, Listen Up, and Machines are all like three of the singles that you've released. Some of the first three tracks on the album. Break this one down. I think we might have even mentioned this one, or it was coming out soon. What's this one about, etc.
Oh yeah. This one is, I mean, yeah, as you know, I'm an environmentalist first, but I am still very much a socialist, and this is like the big expression of workers' angst on this album. The tagline, "Do you believe we're more than just machines destined to serve their greed?" Like, yeah, and it's just all about being treated like a disposable piece of equipment. And I feel like people, like I work in a salaried field where people don't really identify with that a lot, but it's kind of like the space is kind of changing where I don't think there's really like a waged job that isn't that way anymore, right? Like my colleagues, even if they don't realize, they're disposable, I'm disposable, and like the moment you're burned out, the moment you're any of these things, like you're out and it's with the next one. And so that's kind of like the big expression of that. It doesn't really, like, there's not really much more depth to it other than just like, yeah, it sucks being a worker and we need to expropriate the capitalists because otherwise we're toast.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's even one of those things with like the more than just machines thing too, where you talk about being a salary job. Obviously, like with what I do as a teacher, you're salaried as well, and a lot of people don't realize that like salaries in a lot of ways, salary jobs is a way for them to make sure they can get more work out of you without having to do overtime. Like that's really what it can be. And yeah, you are being exploited. It's just like you're not realizing that you're doing a certain thing like out of your hours that you get paid or whatever the case, or on your unpaid lunch you get or whatever the case may be. And yeah, it's the adage, in a song of like, don't kill yourself working at your job, because the second you die, they're gonna move your body off your desk, like off of your desk, and put the next person in there right away, right? Like one of the most relatable things people, I think, across political spectrums even can relate to.
Well, for sure.
Let's get right into, I know we're plugging away, but maybe at the end of this we can kind of talk about overall concepts and stuff with this as well. But Inhuman, another really great one, can kind of allude to what it's about with the song title alone. But go ahead and tell people about this one. And I don't mean to only harp on the lyrics too. If there's anything you want to like break down as far as the music or anything specifically you can point out on it, feel free to.
Yeah, and so this one's the first one that we've talked about that's not released yet. This one was gonna be the sixth single, and then I just like, because I had a bunch of ideas of what I wanted to do to support it, and I may still do those, so I won't spoil any of them yet, but I did not have time, so I was like, I'll leave it. But yeah, Inhuman it's about imperialism, essentially, and it's about the resistance to imperialism. And so the title, yeah, spoken it's Inhuman, but written there's kind of the brackets around the in, and then it's human, and it's kind of like it's meant to ask the question, and it literally asks the question in the chorus, like, if like fighting to survive, fighting to resist imperialism makes you inhuman. And that like came especially from the genocide going on in Palestine, right? Like the term inhuman was thrown around a lot, especially in the early days of that, to justify just like atrocious actions by the IDF. And like a lot of mainstream media just kind of bought that like wholesale without really looking into it at all. And it's like, well, like what would you do differently, like if you were in this situation. And like even the events of October 6th, there's a lot of kind of like moderate leftists who are like, well, I don't condone what happened there, but the rest of it. And it's like, well, even that though, it's like I don't necessarily explicitly condone or reject it, but like how can you have such a strong stance on this? This is not something you have any understanding of, and you're in such a like privileged position to just look on it and be like, well, I wouldn't have done that. It's like, well, how do you know? Like, what would you have done? Like, propose an alternative. Like, what choice did these people have? And so that's kind of like, yeah, it's meant to ask that question of like, what do you do when you're in this just impossible situation, facing like just the worst of humanity's essence, like, do you just claim the moral high ground and die, or do you like respond with the same and, become, potentially inhuman or whatever like that means?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, first of all, a great angle to this is the language and because so much of that is what gets people to accept certain things going on or things of that nature, right? Like, I always think of there's a Canadian podcaster and political commentator, Rob Rousseau, that I've had on the show before a couple times, and he put it best where he, in that specific situation, but broadly, is like, well, do you condemn like the Nat Turner slave uprisings? Do you condemn the Haiti rebellion that ousted all these people that were taking up that? And you can point to things there where or the French Revolution, if you want to go back that far, for Europe, or the Soviet Revolution, all these different things. Like, you're not going to sit here and say, oh, like what I think people should do right now in my home, in my neighborhood, is go around and kill the people that are oppressing them. You don't have to say that like horrific violence or these things that you can see, these detailed things, that those aren't that horrific violence is not horrific. What you do have to look at is what caused that. What is the implication there? When indigenous people, both in your country and mine, violently fought back to throw off their oppressors and keep their land and keep their culture, when full-blown mass genocides were going on, and it's like, you're not going to say killing somebody is good, and anyone that thinks that that's what you're saying is either stupid or intentionally covering that up to fuel their own propaganda and their own side of things. And so I think that's why a song like this, where it's like specifically talking about the language and also how it creates this sort of inhumanity in and of itself, and it's sort of this feedback loop, is it's quite poignant. I when I listened to it numerous times, I was like, I got pretty much exactly what you were saying, and it's like, damn, I wish I got to set my political anger songs up, man. Like, that was good. Is there anything, I guess I don't, before I barrel through all of these, is there anything as far as like the influences or songwriting process on these songs that like jumps out to you? Is there kind of, I guess I could ask you, I don't even know if I asked you this in general before when we did initial recording, of you write by yourself, as you said, you record these things by yourself primarily. Is there a process that you do as far as the instrumentation goes with these songs? Because you're very dynamic from song to song, and within the songs, like, do you sit and try to find music you listen to kind of give you inspiration? Do you just sit for 4 hours with a guitar until something comes out of it? Like, what's kind of your approach for this record instrumentally?
So it's evolved over time, which is interesting because like a lot of these songs were some of the first songs I wrote for this project. So like even across this album, different ones have been written different ways. Like Canary, and also the last song on the album, The End of the Beginning of the End, were written very much of just like playing guitar and singing stuff over it and trying stuff out. But more recently, like when I write stuff, I hear at least a part of the song pretty much complete in my head before I start playing things. Like for instance, the chorus of Inhuman, that like the whole thing was done, it was written before I ever really touched an instrument, because it just like, I saw that language around the use of inhuman, and I started kind of like, in the back of my mind turning that over in my head, and it came along with kind of a melody, and that came with like the chorus is kind of almost designed to be reminiscent of like bombs falling. Like it's very rhythmic and syncopated, and it's like it comes in from the much like softer kind of verse, and then it's kind of this abrupt, like almost like an airstrike kind of. The verse was definitely written with just like me noodling on guitar for a while, and that's kind of usually how it goes. Like I'll have a very clear cut, crisp idea of a song, or like a part of a song, and then I'll build that outwards with like jamming on some stuff, and yeah, seeing what inspires me. There's a lot of Billy talent in that one.
Yeah, definitely with the because I think this is the one, because I might be mixing up this one and Borrowed Time, because a lot of times I was listening to this in the car on YouTube as like a full album from one or the other. But this is the one where verse wise, yeah, you got kind of like the noodly, like, I don't know if it was harmonized, but newly cleaner guitars going on. And I thought that was like right out of the Billy Talent playbook in like a good way. You're not ripping them off, but it's like that kind of feel that they would do right before the chorus punches in. I thought that was great. Well, thanks for going over that. Again, being able to write like those kind of moments when you can have a song kind of come together in your head, and you just have to like make sure you can keep it in your mind, at work before you go home. That's the biggest struggle in the world, because like if you lose that shit, that is like the worst feeling on the planet.
Yeah.
Let's go into Borrowed Time. speak to this one and what it's about, influences, everything in between.
Yeah. So Borrowed Time, it's funny. It's kind of like, it's a little bit of a sister track to Cassandra, which we'll get into a little bit later. And kind of like what it's expressing is just like this sense of complete powerlessness of like knowing that everything's going sideways and downwards and not doing anything about it, not because you don't want to or you don't see that there needs to be things done, but just because like, what can you do? Like, what difference can you actually make watching these things? And like, even if you understand that, what capacity do you have? You know, like we're all here tied to our jobs. Like we can't just like quit our jobs and go like plant trees in Northern Ontario or wherever the equivalent of that is in the States. Like there's that gap between like seeing that a change needs to happen and actually having any agency at all to do anything about it. And like, that's terrifying in times like these, because the outcome of basically like not only your life, but everything you know is completely out of your own hands.
Yeah, I think anyone that's like politically engaged or has the beliefs that you or I do probably wrestles with that quite a lot. Like I've had people, in bad faith kind of point that out to me. Like, you say you're for this or you're for that, or, all these different things, but like, what are you doing about it? It's like, well, I'm trying to do some things, but I got to work like 2 jobs, and and like you can't exactly take like 3 weeks off work. Yeah. To either, whether it's planting trees or, um, alleged activities of taking down some industries, or in Minecraft or whatever, but like that kind of thing. Like, it's like, no, if you want to ask me my genuine belief on like if those things should happen, I think they should happen. Do I have the resources, the time, the the whatever else to get to that? No. And you like know that collectively that's not why. It's because of a lot of other forces that are far beyond like the average person, but that's why there can't be a real big pushback in the way that's like past needed, right? And yeah, it's a helpless feeling, but it's also one that's very much worth like, I think, coming back to on a regular basis to like remind yourself of that, like not in like a downtrodden way, but like in a like a sobering way, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love it.
Pestilence, definitely a little bit of apocalyptic feel there with the title alone, let alone the song. So break this one down for me.
Yeah. So Pestilence, like, kind of represents a bit of a shift in the tone of the album. Like if I were to separate this into like an A side and a B side on a vinyl or something like that, that's kind of the line where we transcend, or not transcend, but we move from kind of like sort of the hopeful to the hopeless and kind of naive, like liberal ideas, to like this thing's coming down whether or not we want it to. Like it's designed to do that, but the whole thing's rotten to the core. And it's specifically kind of addressing like American propaganda is kind of the essence. And so the analogy there is just like, it's like a disease. And it's written, obviously it's been a little while since COVID's been such a big deal, but COVID was such a big like polarizer in terms of people's beliefs, right? Like you either believed and understood science and medical advice, or you went off on this kind of complete other tangent. And that divide has never healed, even though like we're all back into places and people aren't like typically wearing masks or all those things anymore. But we've never really healed from that divide. And so I figured it was kind of fitting to compare like, this disease that's like taking over you, it becomes your entire person, to like, yeah, like American fundamentalist propaganda. And like, the music video for that one has me dressed as a priest and, preaching. And I've got like a plague mask and stuff on it as well. Cause like, just kind of to point at like American Christian fundamentalism as really one of the deepest wells of just rot that you can identify in American society. Yeah, that's really where that one comes from.
Yeah, I guess as a follow-up question for that for you, because I'm always interested in this, whether I talk to somebody, Canada, Australia, UK, a lot of these sort of like, I don't want to like be a little Trumpy here, but client states in some ways, right? Like I don't think a lot of Americans realize how much like, especially in Canada, at least from what I've been told, a lot of like, honest Canadians will say a lot of the culture and a lot of the news and all that is very, very much propagated by the United States. So like, how much of that did you see, whether it was COVID or foreign policy stuff or whatever? How much have you seen in that from the writing of the song or this kind of new era we're in? How much have you seen that plague, Canada, like on both political and just like communicating with people? Like, what's your sense of that in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting landscape because like a lot of even Canadian conservatives pride themselves on being not as kind of out there as like the American right wing, but it almost makes them more insidious because they compare themselves to, like what they consider to be too far right, but they have quite a bit more in common than they realize. And they're like, I would never, I don't know, like storm the Capitol or any of those things. And it's like, okay, yeah, but that's not the big problem with the American right. The big problem is actually the things that you guys share in common. But then as well, like we do have some very extreme right-wing tendencies. Like we had that whole trucker convoy, which was kind of our January 6th in a sense, just infinitely more ridiculous. And like we still have, like there's still people with like anti-vax banners that like they'll hang them over bridges, like they cross some of our major highways, and like it's insane too, because it's like, one, like there's no more legislation around mandating vaccines. Like they shouldn't have won, but like they did. I don't know why they're out there. And so there's almost like, and I guess the American right has this tendency too, but there's this weird like victim complex of like really wanting to feel like they're fighting and they're persecuted. And it's like, no, like the government's on your side, on board with what you're doing, except for like regular people that just want to go about their lives. Like you're not this weird counterculture protest group. So yeah, I don't know. The Canadian right's very odd. It's not super coherent.
Yeah, it's again going back, like not to go on electoral politics again, because again cesspool, but like it is funny, like Pierre Poilievre, or I keep saying his last name wrong, but I hear it said that way all the time, but I don't care. I can misspell that missay that motherfucker's name. But it is funny that like your guys' version of Trump is like a Millhouse geek. He looks like, you know what I mean? They've tried to like change up his look. I don't know if you've seen that over the years, to try to make him look cool, and it's like it's not working. But yeah, it's crazy. The victim complex thing drives me up a wall, because these people act, I'm gonna sound like a liberal here for a second, but like these people act like they're the most masculine, with it, patriotic, hard-headed, like God and country type people, while simultaneously crying about everything, and yet calling you a snowflake or saying you're triggered or whatever. And it's like, dude, I am not affected by your dumb statements at all. I mean, you're destroying the planet, but like, in a conversation or discourse level, it's like you guys are the ones like sitting there on your phones festering and having a stroke because everything's an attack on your culture or whatever. And it's like, dude, can we not, like, this? How can you have both of those thoughts in your head at the same time? It's like truly baffling. You know what I mean?
It's it's like that guy you mentioned from my Instagram comments, where it's like, so angry and so like, oh, insane cope and shit like that. It's like, bro, like you're in like my band's comment sections losing your mind over like a post I made about trains. Get a grip, dude. But yeah, it's so weird that they can't understand that contradiction of like, they are calling everybody else crybabies while crying constantly about everything.
Yeah, like this is gonna be again. We'll move on to the next song here, but like I started doing like shorter, like really short videos to try to just promote the podcast on like YouTube Shorts or whatever else the case may be, and I made fun of that fake American patriotic MAGA rapper, what's his name, Tom McDonald or whatever. He did a song with like what's her name, Roseanne, and I made fun of it for like 4 seconds, and all I said was like, President Xi, fire when ready, right? That's what I said in it. And these people lost their minds, told me I was calling for terrorism, that I should go to China, which I like told them to buy my ticket, you know what I mean? And like all that kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, this is like a 4-second, and like you're leaving like paragraphs and paragraphs, and I'm the triggered person. It's like I did that in 5 seconds before work and came back to it 4 hours later and was like, what the fuck is happening? And again, that's just like that's typical social media nonsense, but it is funny to see that dynamic of like saying you're so sensitive, all while like tears are pouring down their face. It's incredible, and that's why the world's burning. But anyway, I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, but moving on. Entropic determinism, hell of a song title.
Yeah, so kind of carrying on in the direction of hopelessness on this album. So entropic determinism, this, I'm a nerd, and this is my kind of confession of that. But the meaning of it is, so entropy is the idea that the world tends towards chaos, right? It's the physical phenomenon behind the inevitable heat death of the universe. And of course, determinism is the idea that we have no agency in anything. And so entropic determinism is the world is headed for chaos and there's nothing you can do about it. And then it's all about exactly how that's happening in our lives. It's basically just about like the cycle of violence, both revolutionary and repressive, and how like don't break out of that really ever. And as much as I am a revolutionary, and I do believe that like we need to pursue certainly extra electoral politics, and we will not instigate the violence, but as history has shown, if you do something that works, the state's going to come down on you, and if you can't defend yourself, you're going to lose. History has also shown that even when you win, it's only a matter of time before things go south again. And so I have probably my all-time favorite line on this favorite lyric on this album, which is the second verse. All it takes is one angry man with fertilizer in a van to start the cycle over again.
Yeah, that is fantastic. That is so good. Yeah, I love that so much. God, yeah. I mean, it's entropy is like that sort of concept is one that I try to, same as you, I try to fight against it at all times. I try a lot to do what a lot of, we talked about this last time too, I think, like a lot of my like communist or revolutionary friends would call revolutionary optimism, right? And like put that out there, they've read all the literature, they've done a lot of good work in activism and mutual aid and all these different things. And I can see that, and I want that. Like I want that with every fiber of my being, but you just see the world and you're like, it's also okay to feel at the same time like we're all gonna fucking die. You know what I mean? Like, and I think it's worth, especially in music, not like when you're, if you're at a political junction, probably not the best time to start bringing up those beliefs. Like, actually, regardless of what we're doing, we're all gonna boil. It is, I think in art, especially like in a song like this, where you can get out like that sort of visceral rage and, not complete nihilism, but, cynicism, and things like that. And art that can like be relatable to people. I think that's where this kind of thing, I think that's a good thing to maybe mention, like that's the kind of place where art can be for people like you or me or anyone else that's politically conscious. It's like, you don't have to pretend like you're always having great thoughts and you're always trying to work for the better. You can just recognize that like it feels absolutely like destined for destruction, right? And like historically you're correct as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up revolutionary optimism. That'll come back in two songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll dig into that. Next one is Cassandra.
Cassandra.
Yeah. And so yeah, Cassandra, as I mentioned, yeah, it's kind of like a sister song to Borrowed Time, in the sense that like it's that same kind of like, hopelessness in the face of trying to make change. But this one, it's, even if you do things, like what can be done, right? And so the name Cassandra it comes from the myth of the Trojan prophet, who was cursed to always have correct prophecies, but never to be believed. And like, as a leftist these days, like that's kind of how it feels like when you actually are trying to do things, and like you find the time and the resources to get out there and be like, stuff's going badly, we should do something about it. Like, it's like talking to a wall, except like a wall wouldn't be so stupid some of the time, And so
evolution would take its course at some point with that wall, yeah.
And so yeah, like it's just this expression of, you see all these things happening all the time, and like it's got the kind of tagline, my last words are going to be I told you so, because like that's how it feels, right? Like, especially now, like some of these songs were written in 2020, and I remember having arguments with some of my friends in 2020 being like, things are going sideways, and like now talking to those friends where they're like, yeah, you were right, and it's like no shit, but it's too late now.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? And I mean, yeah, like it's never too late, but it's certainly like later than it was when we could have gotten to the point where we're at now. So yeah, it's just kind of an expression of that frustration. It's a little bit arrogant too, to imply that I'm always right, but like, I don't know, prove me wrong.
I was gonna say it's one of the funny things of like internet discourse that I stay out of, like, for the most part, other than like reading things and finding it funny or whatever. It's like the old adage from like a lot of like when somebody calls you a communist or a tanky or whatever they say, it's like 6 months later they're using the talking points that they were yelling at you about, that you said. It's like, how many times do we have to go over this? Like, it's one of those things that's like, you could say it's arrogant, but it's like, you're not saying that because you're so smart. It's like, you're saying that because you're seeing the big, or like, you're not just consuming, whatever the CNN version is in Canada, or CBC or BBC or whatever else, all the like 3-letter news organizations or whatever it is. Like, you could just read a few things from like a scientific scholar, or you can read like independent journalism where you can hear real testimony from people that have had to live through these horrific things and can see the writing on the wall or whatever the case may be. And it's like, it's not arrogance so much as pointing out that people's, like, I don't know, to me it's like when you say last words are going to mean I told you so, it's like that's literally telling people that like you were, like, you kept saying you were right and you've been wrong the entire time, right? Like, that could also be the way you can read it, you know what I mean? But yeah, this is one that I did like a little video for this one when you first put this one out, because this one caught me. Like, I love the, and it was because of that first line when you come in with it. It's like, oh yeah, you know exactly what the song is about without even hearing the rest of the lyrics. And it's like, above all too, like a very catchy song, and a very like fun song as well, despite the lyrical topics, which again, you do a really good job of that in these songs. Like, I don't know if I've gone over this with you before too much, but like, I make similar like political commentary type music, but mine is always extremely just like screaming into a microphone over breakdowns, angry, like, and certainly not as poetic, because I think I've called for people to get lobotomies several times in music. So I'll leave the good writing to you, and I'll just yell my head off, and we can go from there. But no, great song. Cassandra is an absolutely fantastic track. Probably one of my most played ones over the last couple of months on my end personally. Let's go ahead and go to I Tried. Break this one down for me.
Yeah. And so, yeah, this one's kind of like the thesis of the whole thing. And this is where we kind of get back into revolutionary optimism, is like, it's because like, it's, even though there's a track after this is really like the end of the thought process, right? Like, it's over, we're done, there's nothing really else that you can do, right? And so like, even over the course of the song, the chorus progresses from like, it doesn't have to end this way to it didn't have to end this way, and then it goes into that instrumental outro that's just kind of like an expression of grief, really, more than anything else. But how it kind of ties into like kind of the message of this album and like revolutionary optimism is, it's this idea that like, even if you don't believe that we're probably going to make it out of this one with any semblance of society as we know it, like, the chances are probably at this point 90% barbarism, 10% socialism. When we hit that point, like, do you want to hit that point knowing that you did everything that you could for that 10% chance at socialism, or do you want to watch the horrors unfold and be like, I could have done more and maybe it would have made the difference, right? And like, it's kind of like, the point of it is like, activism, for all that it's for other people and for all that like the end goal is to make a better society, it's also so that you can live with yourself, and so that at the end of the day, like, you can be at peace with what's going to happen, because like, there's a good chance that we all die horrifically violent deaths in the next like 20 to 40 years. And like, when that happens, like, yeah, you want to be at peace with yourself, is really like, you want to know that you did everything you could to avoid that, and the only way to do that is to keep fighting, even if you don't think it's going to work.
The fight in and of itself is worthy of the cause, right?
Yeah.
Like, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's good that you got some constructive, you got optimism in there without being optimistic. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny. There's like another there's like a pop punk emo band from New York that I've had on a couple of times, Career Day, that's absolutely fantastic. And they had a song on their latest EP that was like not the exact same song, but the exact same like lyrical content, where it's like, you're really gonna experience all this stuff and not like attempt, for like when the end days come. Like it's that sort of thing, and I think that's another way to like connect this sort of thinking with people more often, because I think so many people can feel like left wing people or leftist people or socialists or whatever can both be like completely nihilistic and like hold these like absolutely like utopian ideas. Like I think that's the critique a lot of like less political people would say, is that like socialists are utopian thinking and all that kind of stuff. And it's like it's not really about that. It's about like literally clawing for anything, right? Like it's like substantial and substantive and not going back and forth on this neoliberal hellhole like from party to party for the end of eternity. Yeah, this one was great. I know I'm saying that about every single one of them because I've enjoyed the whole record. That kind of goes into the last track, the end of the beginning of the end, title track at the end, which is kind of cool and makes sense with the album title as well, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and speak to this one for me.
For sure. And so this one's near and dear to my heart. This was kind of like what inspired me to go from just like, writing a bunch of loose songs to making a band, because I had this idea for this song and I was like, that would be a fantastic album. And the whole kind of concept of this album, like it's kind of mutated since I initially came up with it, but like that was what really drove me to like found Cruel Hope and do everything that we've done up until this point. And it's kind of like, again, kind of going back to musical theater terms, like it's meant to be kind of like the chorus at the end of it. It ties all the things together. And it's kind of supposed to be almost written from after the apocalypse, paradoxically. Like it has some lines in there like the post-historic sun, things along those lines. And yeah, it's like a really upbeat, not quite pop punk, but like bordering on pop punk tune, just describing the annihilation of humanity that we've brought on ourselves. And, it's like, if you kind of put it in the framing of like the 5 stages of grief, like it is acceptance all the way down. It's like, we had our chance. We chose this path. We are paying the consequences. That's it. That's the song.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't wrap up the album on what you call a hopeful note. But at the same time, like I don't know, I think that acceptance piece of it is like profound on it. Like it's even like I just kind of joke, but it even like it's not even just like a song that speaks to the album. I don't usually talk about people's band names because I think that's like the most tired question music interviewers ask of all time. But your band name really does like cater to the kind of music that you put out pretty explicitly. And it's like, I don't know, this whole album is kind of like a moniker for that Cruel Hope emblem too, right? In a lot of ways. And it is like it's like a weirdly like, I don't know, the song kind of has like this weirdly peaceful aura about it, in the sense of like, I don't know, accepting that the world's done and like we made all the wrong choices does have a sense of like not having the dread anymore, I guess, right? Like when you're floating in the ethereal emptiness of whatever happens after you die or when the world's gone or whatever, this is kind of like the contemplative aspect to it. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah, again, this whole album, the ending of the beginning of the end is absolutely fantastic and nice and concise too. I think it clocks in at what, like 41 minutes.
Yeah.
So anybody that's listening to the band for the first time, it's not like this huge endeavor that you need to like spend an hour and a half or 60 plus minutes of your time on. Although I do advise listening to it multiple times. I think there's a lot to get out of these songs, both lyrically and instrumentally. I know we tend to go pretty hard on the lyrics here, but overall, just what do you hope people get out of the album, and if there's any other just overall broad thoughts on the songs and the release?
Yeah, I mean, I hope people, like, I don't want people to listen to this album and then sit there and be like, that was a cool album, and then do nothing. Like, I want this album to be the kind of thing that people listen to that like strikes them and like it makes them feel good in the sense that they've listened to music that they like, but kind of makes them feel a little bit bad too. Like kind of awakens that nagging voice that like you and I both have, that are like, you need to do something. Like, for all that like liberal individualism puts a lot of personal responsibility on the people for like recycling and stuff. Like, I don't really mean in that sense, but like, you need to organize with your community. Like, you need to educate yourself. You need to actively resist what's going on, or else this is going to happen. And you knew about it. You had an opportunity to do something. And yeah, I want this to inspire people to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great message. The first, of course, like on the surface level, you want people to say like the songs kick ass and all that stuff, but like that maybe just a line or maybe one of the songs or something, if they're listening to it and haven't thought about these things before, that you kind of, get them that first step of like thinking about things and outside of like this very narrow framework we're kind of given broadly as a culture. You know what I mean? I think that's a great way to look at it. Well, again, Liam, thanks for going over this. I know you've got an upcoming album release party show going on the 4th for the same day of the record coming out. What's going next for the band after the release? What do you guys have going on? What are you up to? What are the plans, I guess, for the rest of 2025?
Yeah, so we've got like a little Southern Ontario, one date in Quebec as well, kind of mini tour across like April and May. So like pretty much like last weekend of April all the way to May, we're playing like at least one out of town show a weekend. And that's going to be really cool. Getting to some cities we haven't played before, getting back into some cities we played a couple times. It's our like biggest kind of string of shows as well. We got a festival North by Northeast in Toronto at the end of that, which is going to be nice. The specific date hasn't announced yet, but when it does, it'll be on all our socials and whatnot. And then past that, like, we'll kind of see, like, we'll put out this album, we'll do this tour, and then like I kind of want to just sit with it for a bit and see like how it's received, how people are responding to it, and like see where we go from there. Like I'm already kind of writing songs for a second album, but yeah, we gotta see how the first one does and then kind of make plans from there.
This is usually where I joke to like Canadian bands that I talk to that like, oh yeah, we'll get you into the States and we'll get you to do some States tour. I don't think that's like what people are trying to do right now. Unfortunately, it's weird time to, it's weird for me to kind of realize that I'm saying that for the first time since doing the show. But yeah, hopefully people in the United States can come see you guys in Canada. That's what we'll go with for the time being,
Yeah,
and stay there, but no, seriously. And again, all that stuff will be in the show notes below. Last two things, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. Plug where people can find the band, where people can find the record, all that good stuff. Anything else you want to plug there? And then pick a song from the album to play at the end of this for people.
For sure. Yeah. So yeah, you can find us on Instagram. If you want to see us rage baiting Trump supporters in the comments, it's open season. It's a great time. You can buy the album we've got it digitally on Bandcamp. I'll probably try to like physically release it there as well. I just have to figure out like shipping and whatnot. And then, but yeah, digitally on there for sure. Like our merch and stuff will be available there too. And then of course at shows, if you're Canadian or in Ontario, we'll be moving our CDs. We're bringing back the 90s with this one.
Hell yeah.
CD, they're cheap to make. The album artwork's kind of cool too. So I'm like, if you want to use it as a coaster or whatever, like do it.
Yeah.
Just like have
something
it around.
Tangible to have, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Some record when all the cloud servers go down, like at least a CD will be like unearthed by some archaeologists 10,000 years from now.
Like, what do I do? Do I spin this? What do I do with it? Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of songs to check out off this one, I feel like Cassandra is probably the one to close this guy off with.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a strong song as a single, and it'll probably pull people in that, if you like that song, you're going to definitely like the rest of the album, I think is a good way to put it. So yeah, we'll end this off here with playing Cassandra, I Told You So, from Cruel Hope on their new album, The End of the Beginning of the End. That'll be out now from when this is put out. So again, Liam, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed breaking this down with you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely.
So heavy, set in a restless sky. I felt myself awaken as I realized the future that they're building is nothing but a lie. And if we buy what they're selling, it'll cost us our lives. I see it all so clearly. I know this every song. Nobody believes me. My last words are gonna be I told you. My last words are gonna